Hello. If you like what I'm doing, please like and subscribe. This video is different because I want to talk to you about Peter David. Peter David is 66 years old. He's very much alive, but he's in very poor health. He has suffered several strokes and a mild heart attack. I'd like to talk to you about his career a little bit, but if you look in the link underneath in the comments, the first comment will be from me, and it'll be the link to the GoFundMe page. They were trying to raise $40,000 to help him, and they're over $50,000, but he's going to need more than that. Him and his family need help. Peter David was born September 23rd, 1956. He's 66 years old. He did one of the most controversial storylines, in my opinion, in comic book. Two of them. He did the death of Captain Gene DeWolf. Gene DeWolf was a major support character in the Spider-Man comics. She was well liked and well loved by the people who read the comics. She was there to help Spider-Man a lot, not trying to capture him or anything like a lot of the Marvel cops were doing back then. For 12 years, he wrote The Incredible Hulk. The Incredible Hulk he did a storyline, which was the other controversy in 312, where Bruce it revealed that a lot of his anger issues come from his father abusing him as a kid. You don't see that much in comics, real world stuff like that. They do some, but not much. Then at DC Comics, he worked on the Phantom, the Ghost Who Walks, which is a comic strip character. He did many series there. Then he was on the Action Comics, went weekly, where they did like 5 or 6 stories each week. With different characters. Like Superman did 2 pages, Green Lantern did several pages, Dead Man, bunch of others. The he did Green Lantern for them. Did a pretty good job. I liked it. Then he moved on to First Comics. First Comics was a smaller company which took several. Marvel at one time had a comic book line called Epic Comics. It had some great titles, and they gave up on them. And Marvel first took over some of them and some other comics from other companies that went out of business. One was called Dreadstar. That was created by the brilliant Jim Starlin. But in issue 41 to 64, Peter David wrote it. It did a pretty good job. I liked what he did with that. Then he came back to Marvel, and worked on Wolverine. Then when he was working on Wolverine, Marvel decided to create their own another universe called the New Universe, which were all characters that had nothing to do with anything in Marvel. It was all new characters, all new powers, all new everything. Starbrand, which is kind of a Green Lantern ripoff, actually, was one of the characters that was introduced there. It's like him and Night Mask are the only two who merged into the regular universe. Or it's a she now, isn't Starbrand. But he did a comic called Mark Hazard, Merc, and Justice, which was, not even sure what Justice was, but it was one of the comics. I don't know everything about comics, sorry. He created a comic book, I believe, called X Factor, or he worked on X Factor for a long time. That was the comic where they brought back the original 5 X-Men and gave them their own book. Then they started doing a futuristic Marvel comic line called 2099, X-Men, Doctor Doom. Actually, it was Doctor Doom for our timeline, but he moved up. He was sent into the future, and Spider-Man, which we've seen in the Spider-Man comics. He was on Earth for a while, 21st century, 2020, whatever it was. So Spider-Man 2099. Then he was at DC again, where he did Aquaman, the Atlantis Chronicles, which was the history of Atlantis before the sinking. And he also worked on Aquaman for 4 years, where Aquaman ended up losing one of his hands, and he replaced it with a hook that could do mechanical stuff in that. I don't know if it was him or whoever took over the comic book after that. It turned it into a mystical hand, which was kind of dumb. DC Comics at the time 88 to 91 was doing Star Trek. Peter David wrote some of the Star Trek comics. Peter David would later go on and write Star Trek novels, Star Trek novel paperbacks, including 4 Q titles, including Q Squared and Q, and all a couple of others. One of them told the story of Q and Loxana Troy supposedly falling in love, and Q gives her powers. It was one of the funniest things I ever read because she realizes that he'd been using her, and she decides to knock the stuffing out of him, using his own powers against him. He also did one called Imzadi, which was the story of Deanna Troy after his death. He also did one of my favorite comics of all time called Captain Marvel from Marvel Comics, the alien Captain Marvel's son. It gets confusing. Marvel DC both have Captain Marvel characters, though the DC one was before the original, the Marvel Captain Marvel one. And he did some very funny stuff. He did issue where Rick Jones' character, which was a Hulk sidekick, and then Captain Marvel Senior and Junior's sidekick, owned a comic book store with his wife and had Captain Marvel Jr., or Genesis as he was called, come and do a signing. And these nerds come up and to him, who was hotter, Betty or Veronica? I'm surprised Archie didn't sue them for that. It's kind of funny. And then another one came up and says, there was a Captain Marvel before you. He goes, and Janice goes, I'm his son. And he goes, so you're Captain Marvel Jr. And he goes, I guess. And somebody goes, he yells out to the crowd, goes, hey, this is the guy who can't say his name without turning back into a kid again. That was originally in the DC Comics, the Captain Marvel, psychic Captain Marvel Jr., he got his powers not from saying Shazam, but by saying Captain Marvel. So he, I don't know for certain why he did this. If anybody out there knows, on the in the Captain Marvel comic, on the inside front page, they usually did a recap of what happened in the comic before that. And he, I think he figured out nobody ever read this, so he decided to write his own story that had nothing to do with the comic book. It was the story of the Cabana Boy. Oh my God, was that funny? He just, it had nothing to do with Marvel Comics, it had nothing to do with superheroes. It was just a funny comedy story about a Cabana Boy. And it was, each issue had a different story. And it was brilliant. I mean, it was completely brilliant. The man is a genius. He also, for those of you who saw She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, Peter David's the one who wrote the story that the TV series was based on. He did the She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. He also worked on Stephen King's Dark Tower that Marvel Comics did an adaptation to. This is probably one of the most brilliant comic book writers I have ever had the pleasure of reading. I wish I met him. I mean, he's still alive, and I hope and pray he gets better soon. I ask for all of you, if you can help, donate to GoFundMe. It'll be in the comment section underneath, and I ask you to pray for him too, and his family. All right? Well, that's it for now. I'll talk to you guys soon.